They say retirement is supposed to be golden years, but nobody warns you about the silence. The deafening, soul-crushing silence that fills your days when you realize the people you sacrificed everything for have simply forgotten you exist. My name is Eleanor Hartwell, and for 37 years, I was the Vice President of Operations at Meridian Financial Group, one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. I built that company from a struggling startup into a billion-dollar empire, working 16-hour days, missing birthdays, school plays, and countless moments with my only child, Sarah. But I told myself it was all for her. Every missed dinner, every canceled vacation, every time I chose the boardroom over the living room, it was all so she could have the best life possible. Harvard education, check. Luxury apartment in Manhattan, check. Trust fund that would set her up for life, check. The day I retired at 65, I expected things to change. I expected my daughter, now 32 and a successful marketing executive herself, to finally have time for the mother who had given her everything. I imagined lazy Sunday brunches, shopping trips, maybe even those heart-to-heart conversations we'd never quite managed to have. Instead, I got a generic congratulations text and a bouquet of flowers delivered by a service. That was 3 years ago. 3 long, empty years. The calls became sporadic, then rare, then practically non-existent. Sorry, Mom, I'm swamped at work. Rain check on dinner, big presentation tomorrow. Can't talk right now, in a meeting. The excuses multiplied while the visits disappeared entirely. I learned about her promotion to marketing director through LinkedIn. I found out she was dating someone serious when I accidentally saw their vacation photos on her public Instagram account, an account she apparently forgot I followed. When they broke up 6 months later, I heard about it through our family lawyer, who mentioned it casually during a routine trust fund review. My own daughter had become a stranger, and I had become invisible. But Eleanor Hartwell didn't build a corporate empire by sitting idle. If my daughter wouldn't come to me, I would go to her, though not in the way she'd ever expect. The opportunity presented itself when my former colleague, Richard Morrison, called me for lunch. Richard now sat on the board of directors at Pinnacle Creative Agency, where Sarah had recently been hired as their new marketing director after leaving her previous firm. According to Richard, Pinnacle was hemorrhaging money, losing clients, and desperately needed new leadership. Eleanor, they need someone with your expertise, Richard said, cutting into his steak. Their current CEO is a disaster. Young guy, lots of flash, no substance. The board wants him out, but they need someone who can step in immediately and turn things around. I set down my wine glass carefully. And you're suggesting me? You built Meridian from nothing. You know how to save a sinking ship. Plus, Pinnacle handles marketing for several financial firms. It's not entirely outside your wheelhouse. I should have said no. I should have enjoyed my retirement, found some hobbies, maybe traveled the world. Instead, I heard myself asking, when would they need me to start? The answer was immediately. Within 2 weeks, I was the new CEO of Pinnacle Creative Agency. The board was thrilled to have someone with my reputation, even if I was coming from a different industry. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that my primary motivation wasn't saving their company. It was finally understanding who my daughter had become. I insisted on a quiet transition. No press releases, no big announcements. I wanted to observe the company culture, assess the situation, and make strategic decisions without the pressure of publicity. What I really wanted was to watch Sarah without her knowing I was there. My first day, I arrived early and stationed myself in the glass-walled conference room adjacent to the main workspace. From there, I could see everything while appearing to be just another executive reviewing reports. And there she was. Sarah sat at a corner desk, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her face illuminated by the glow of dual monitors. She wore a navy blazer I recognized. I'd given it to her for her birthday 2 years ago, though she'd never mentioned receiving it. For a moment, my heart swelled with pride. She looked professional, confident, successful. Then I began to really watch. Over the next several days, I observed my daughter through the lens of a CEO evaluating an employee, and what I saw broke my heart in ways I hadn't expected. Sarah was brilliant, there was no denying that. Her presentations were flawless, her strategies innovative, her work ethic impeccable. But she was also completely isolated. While her colleagues chatted by the coffee machine or grabbed lunch together, Sarah ate alone at her desk. When team meetings ended, others lingered to joke and connect, but Sarah immediately returned to her computer. She worked late every night, often being the last person to leave the building. She arrived early and stayed through lunch. She was, I realized with growing horror, exactly like I had been at her age. During my second week, I attended my first company-wide meeting as CEO. Sarah was presenting the quarterly marketing results, and I watched from the back of the room as she delivered a masterful presentation to the 30-person team. Her numbers were impressive, her insights sharp, her recommendations sound. When she finished, the applause was polite but brief. A few people asked perfunctory questions, but I noticed something troubling. Nobody seemed to really know her. They respected her work, but she hadn't built any meaningful relationships. She was an island in the middle of a supposedly collaborative environment. After the meeting, I introduced myself to various team members, including Sarah. When I shook her hand and said, "Ms. Hartwell, I've heard excellent things about your work," she smiled politely and thanked me. There wasn't even a flicker of recognition in her eyes when she heard my name. She'd taken her father's surname professionally, something I hadn't known, and the idea that the new CEO might be related to her never crossed her mind. "I look forward to working with you, Ms. Morgan," she said, using the maiden name I'd chosen for this position. "If you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." The formality in her voice, the professional distance she maintained. It was like looking in a mirror from 30 years ago. I had created this. In trying to give her everything, I had taught her that work was love, that success was connection, that achievement was the only thing that mattered. My third week, I made a decision that would change everything. I started small. I began taking walking meetings with different department heads, ostensibly to understand the business better. When I met with Sarah, I suggested we grab coffee at a nearby cafe instead of sitting in the sterile conference room. "Tell me about yourself," I said as we settled into a corner booth. "I like to get to know the people who make this company successful." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I've been in marketing for 8 years. I have experience in B2B campaigns, digital strategy, client relations." "That's your resume," I interrupted gently. "I asked about you." She blinked, clearly thrown. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Do you have hobbies? Family? What do you do when you're not working?" The question seemed to genuinely puzzle her. Work is pretty demanding. I don't have much time for hobbies." "Family?" A shadow crossed her face. "My father passed away when I was in college. My mother, we're not very close." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened with your mother?" Sarah stirred her coffee absently. "She was always working when I was growing up. Very successful businesswoman, but she didn't have time for personal relationships. I guess I learned that work comes first. And you believe that? Don't you?" Sarah looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I mean, you're CEO of a company. You must understand that success requires sacrifice." I wanted to tell her that I understood better than she could possibly imagine. I wanted to tell her that I had spent 3 years learning that all the success in the world meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. Instead, I asked, "What did you sacrifice?" The question hung in the air between us. Sarah's composure cracked slightly, and for just a moment, I saw the little girl who used to wait up for me to come home from business trips. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I guess I never thought about it that way." That conversation became the first of many. Over the following weeks, I found reasons to spend time with Sarah. Project reviews, strategy sessions, client meetings. Slowly, carefully, I began to chip away at the walls she'd built around herself. I learned that she lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment, worked most weekends, and hadn't taken a real vacation in over 2 years. She had no close friends, no hobbies, no interests outside of work. She ordered dinner to the office most nights and often slept on the couch in her office rather than making the commute home. She was successful, respected, and completely alone. Just like I had been. One evening, about 6 weeks into my tenure, I found Sarah still at her desk at 9 p.m., squinting at her computer screen in the darkened office. "Long day?" I asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. She looked up, startled. "Ms. Morgan, I didn't know you were still here." "I'm not anymore. Neither are you. Come on." "I'm sorry. We're leaving. There's a little Italian place around the corner that I've been wanting to try. My treat." Sarah glanced back at her computer. "I really should finish this proposal. The proposal will be there tomorrow. When's the last time you had a real meal that didn't come from a delivery app?" She couldn't answer, which was answer enough. Over dinner, something shifted. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was exhaustion. But Sarah's professional mask began to slip. She told me about the pressure she felt to prove herself, about the fear that slowing down meant falling behind, about the loneliness that had become so familiar she barely noticed it anymore. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm working so hard for," she admitted, twirling pasta around her fork. "Like, what's the point of being successful if there's no one to share it with?" "Tell me about your mother," I said gently. Sarah's fork paused midway to her mouth. "Why do you ask? You mentioned you weren't close." "I'm curious." She set down her fork and reached for her wine glass. She tried, I think, in her own way. But she was always busy, always focused on work. I used to think she loved her job more than she loved me. The words were a knife to my heart, but I forced myself to listen. When I got older, I told myself I understood. She was building something important, providing for our family. But Sarah's voice trailed off. But I needed her. Especially after Dad died. And she just wasn't there. Physically sometimes, but never really present. It was like she was always somewhere else, thinking about something else. I had to look away to hide the tears threatening to spill over. "Do you think she knew? How much you needed her?" Sarah considered this. "I don't know. Maybe she thought providing for me was the same as loving me. Maybe she thought success was the best gift she could give me. And now I think maybe we were both wrong." The next morning, I made a decision that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I asked Sarah to come to my office for a private meeting. "I have something to tell you," I began, my hands trembling slightly as she settled into the chair across from my desk. "Something important." She leaned forward, professional and attentive. "My real name isn't Margaret Morgan," I said quietly. "It's Eleanor Hartwell." Sarah's face went blank, then confused. "I don't understand." "I'm your mother, Sarah." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Sarah's face cycled through disbelief, shock, anger, and finally, a hurt so profound it took my breath away. "You're lying," she whispered. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a photo, Sarah's high school graduation picture, the one I'd kept on my desk at Meridian for 15 years. Her hands shook as she took it from me. "Why?" The word came out broken, barely audible. "Because I needed to understand who you'd become. Because I spent 3 years waiting for a daughter who never came, and I realized I didn't even know the person I was waiting for." Sarah stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You're insane." "Sarah, please." "No." Her voice cracked. "You couldn't be bothered to be my mother when I was growing up, and now you want to play CEO games with my life? How long were you planning to keep this up? How long were you going to sit there and let me tell you about my disappointing mother without revealing that you were her? I needed to know." "Know what?" "How much I resented you. How much your absence shaped my entire life." "Congratulations, Mom, mission accomplished. You raised a daughter exactly like you, successful, ambitious, and completely incapable of connecting with another human being." She headed for the door, then stopped and turned back to me. "The saddest part is, I was actually starting to like Margaret Morgan. She was the first person in years who seemed to see me as more than just my job performance. But she was just another lie, wasn't she? Just like everything else." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in my office with the echo of her words and the devastating realization that I had somehow made everything worse. Sarah didn't come to work the next day, or the day after that. She'd submitted her resignation by email, effective immediately. Her assistant told me she'd already started packing her apartment, that she was moving to California for a fresh start. I had found my daughter only to lose her all over again. But Eleanor Hartwell hadn't built an empire by giving up at the first sign of failure. If Sarah wouldn't listen to Margaret Morgan, the CEO, maybe she'd listen to Eleanor Hartwell, the mother. I showed up at her apartment on a rainy Thursday evening, standing in the hallway outside her door for 10 minutes before I worked up the courage to knock. "Go away," came her muffled voice from inside. "I'm not leaving," I called back. "I'll stand here all night if I have to. Then you'll be standing there alone." "I've been alone for 3 years, Sarah. I can handle one more night." Several minutes passed before I heard the deadbolt turn. Sarah opened the door but didn't invite me in. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, wearing an old Harvard sweatshirt I remembered buying her freshman year. "What do you want?" she asked. "To apologize. To explain. To tell you that you were right about everything. I know I was right. That doesn't fix anything. Maybe not. But it's a start." She studied my face for a long moment, then stepped aside to let me enter. Her apartment was half-packed, boxes stacked everywhere. The walls were bare except for a few photographs I was surprised to see. Pictures of us from when she was young, before work consumed my life entirely. "I kept those," she said, noticing my gaze. "I don't know why." We sat on her couch, an ocean of unspoken words between us. "I was wrong," I began. "About everything. I thought providing for you was the same as being present for you. I thought success was love. I thought if I could give you everything I never had, that would be enough. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And by the time I realized that, I didn't know how to change. I'd been Eleanor the CEO for so long, I'd forgotten how to be Eleanor the mother." Sarah pulled her knees up to her chest. "Do you know what the worst part was? It wasn't that you missed my school plays or forgot my birthday. It was that even when you were there, you weren't really there. You were always thinking about work, always distracted, always somewhere else in your head." "I know. And then when Dad died, I needed you more than ever, and you just retreated further into work. Like our grief was an inconvenience you couldn't fit into your schedule." The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't know how to help you. I was grieving too, but I'd never learned how to process emotions. Work was the only way I knew how to cope. So you taught me to cope the same way. "Yes. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 32 years of missed connections settling between us. "Why did you really take that job?" Sarah finally asked. "Because I missed you. Because I realized that all the success in the world didn't matter if I didn't have my daughter in my life. And because I wanted to understand who you'd become, since I'd missed watching you become her." "And what did you learn?" I took a shaky breath. "That I created a person who's brilliant and strong and capable of incredible things. But also someone who's lonely and isolated and afraid to let people in. Just like I was." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to be different." "Neither do I admitted. "But maybe we can figure it out together." She looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time in years. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me try to be the mother you deserved. Starting now. I'm moving to California. Then I guess I'm visiting California a lot." Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. "You'd do that?" "Sarah, I'd do anything. I spent 37 years building a company, but I want to spend whatever years I have left building a relationship with my daughter. If you'll let me." The silence stretched between us, filled with possibility and pain in equal measure. "I start my new job in 2 weeks, Sarah said finally. "Congratulations. What kind of company?" "A nonprofit. They do marketing for environmental causes." She paused. "The pay is terrible, and the hours are probably going to be just as long, but I don't know. Maybe it's time I worked for something I actually cared about. I'm proud of you." The words seemed to surprise her. "Really? Really? You're braver than I ever was." Sarah uncurled from the couch and moved to sit beside me. Not quite close enough to touch, but closer than we'd been in years. "I saw Margaret Morgan, you. Differently than I'd ever seen anyone," she said quietly. "For the first time in my adult life, someone seemed interested in me as a person, not just as an employee or a resume. It felt nice. It was real, Sarah. Everything I felt about you during those weeks was real. The professional admiration, the personal concern, the genuine affection, that was all real. I just couldn't tell you who I really was. Because you thought I wouldn't give you a chance if I knew. Because I knew you wouldn't give me a chance if you knew. And I was probably right." Sarah considered this. "Yeah, you probably were." We talked until nearly midnight, finally having the conversations we should have had years ago. I told her about the loneliness of retirement, about watching her success from afar, about the pride and regret that had consumed me. She told me about her fear of ending up like me, about the relationships she'd sabotaged because she didn't know how to balance work and personal life, about the dreams she'd abandoned because they seemed impractical. When I finally stood to leave, Sarah walked me to the door. "Mom," she said as I stepped into the hallway. It was the first time she'd called me that in years. "Yes. When you visit California, maybe we could have dinner. Like real dinner. Not a business meeting or a quick catch-up. Just dinner. I'd like that very much. And maybe you could tell me about Dad. About what he was like when you two were young, before work became everything. I realize I don't know those stories." My heart swelled with more hope than I'd felt in years. "I have so many stories to tell you." That was 6 months ago. Sarah moved to San Francisco and started her new job, and I've visited her every month since. We have dinner, we walk through Golden Gate Park, We talk about everything and nothing. Last month, she even laughed at one of my terrible jokes. It's not perfect. We're both still learning how to be a family, how to prioritize relationships over achievements, how to be present instead of just productive. But we're learning together. I sold my shares in Pinnacle Creative and used the money to start a foundation that provides scholarships for single mothers returning to school. Sarah helps with their marketing pro bono. It's our first real collaboration, and it feels like the beginning of something beautiful. Yesterday, Sarah called me just to chat. No agenda, no specific reason. She just wanted to hear my voice. We talked for over an hour about her new apartment, her coworkers, a guy she's been dating who actually makes her smile. "Mom," she said before we hung up. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad you became my boss. Even if it was crazy and manipulative and probably crossed about 17 different ethical boundaries." I laughed. "Me too. And Mom, yeah, I love you too." It had taken me 68 years to learn that success isn't measured in profit margins or quarterly reports. It's measured in moments like these, when your daughter calls you just to say she loves you, when she trusts you enough to share her hopes and fears, when she laughs at your terrible jokes and lets you be part of her world. My name is Eleanor Hartwell, and I spent 37 years building a company. But the most important thing I ever built was the bridge back to my daughter's heart. And this time, I'm never letting go.